The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
We need to do a better job as coaches of using our platform and bringing in people who are going to talk about like mental health and like the mental side of not just being an athlete, but like a student athlete and then being a teenager and having that be a part of your program as well.
Garrett Hickey is entering his 5th season at Fairfield College Preparatory School in Fairfield, Connecticut. Hickey was previously an assistant coach at Albertus Magnus College in New Haven, Connecticut from 2015 to 2017. Prior to his time at Albertus, Hickey was a scout for Notre Dame Fairfield High School. Garrett produces a weekly newsletter for coaches called Share the Game. He's a Fast Model contributor and works with PhD basketball as a skills trainer and AAU coach. Hickey also teaches middle school social studies in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Hey Hoopheads, I wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Sign up now for their Virtual Camp 2.0 featuring 10 days of workouts with pro trainers from the Dr. Dish family. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Coach Mark Anderson from the Owensboro Thoroughbreds of the TBL, and you're listening to the Hoopheads Podcast.
If you're looking to improve your coaching, please consider joining the Hoopheads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoopheads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Follow us on social media at hoopheadspod on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out the Hoopheads Podcast Network for more great basketball content. Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering new subscribers 10% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code SAVE10 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its Playbank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Grab your notebook before you listen to this episode with Garrett Hickey, assistant boys basketball coach at Fairfield Prep in the state of Connecticut. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel this evening. He is unfortunately under the weather, but I am pleased to be joined by Garrett Hickey, the associate head coach at Fairfield Prep. Garrett, welcome to the Hoopheads Pod.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to talking some hoops with you tonight.
It is going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to diving into all of the different things that you are doing to have a positive impact on the game of basketball. Let's start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell us about your introduction to the game and maybe some of your first experiences.
Sure. So actually growing up, I was pretty much a baseball kid through and through, and I played basketball really because it was the only sport that I kind of was familiar with and that was going on during the winter when baseball wasn't going on. So, I played in middle school and I made the freshman team in high school. I was actually cut my sophomore year from our basketball team. Tried out again my junior year and made it, and then was cut again my senior year. And that was tough to get cut after, remaking the team again. But looking back on it, after I got cut, I decided to play, your regular rec league team in the town, and we had a coach who wasn't exactly too committed to us, and so a lot of times he wouldn't show up for practice or our games, and that was kind of the first experience I had in coaching, because I just took everything that we did at when I was on the high school team, and we just did it during practice. So I would make like practice plans, and I made a playbook for everybody. And so that was kind of my first taste of coaching. I don't think when I was doing it, I really thought of it as coaching. I think I was just more annoyed that the coach wasn't actually there. But then, I went to Assumption College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I made friends with a lot of the guys on the basketball team. I just kind of went and watched a lot of their games, and the coach was nice enough to have me go and watch some of the practices. But again, it was mostly just a fan of the game. And after I graduated, I didn't really know what I was doing with my life, so I went back to school to become a teacher. And I got my master's degree in that. And I was lucky enough when I became a student teacher, the middle school that I was in had a very good middle school basketball program that was actually coached by a former D2 coach, Larry Menta, here in Connecticut. He was at Southern Connecticut, and we played 55 games that winter, and I got to be a sponge with him and just kind of learn a lot of the game and a lot of the coaching from him. And then that same exact year, I was lucky enough where one of the teachers at the school was a high school coach and asked me to help out with their fall league. And I fell in love with it then. And I asked to volunteer and scout. So I would coach our middle school team at practices, and then I'd go scout some of the high school games and do scouting reports. And to make a long story short, it just so happened that year, one of our players was being recruited by Albertus Magnus College, which is a D3 college here in Connecticut. And that summer they had an assistant job open up, and I was lucky enough to be able to get that job. And that's kind of what's brought me full circle now. I'm no longer at Albertus. I was there for a few years, and now I'm at the high school level. So,
all right, I want to work backwards. So let's go back. Let's go back to your college experience, because I also graduated from college, had no idea really what I wanted to do, and went back to school once I finished as a player. Went back to school to get a teaching degree so that I could teach and coach. So what was your original major in college?
So I majored in history.
Okay.
And at first I thought about being a lawyer, and then I kind of always went back and forth about going into education. My mom was a teacher and a principal, so it was always something that I grew up with. And what happened is I graduated, I moved back to my parents' house, and I worked for my dad. And I always joke, I loved the money, but I hated the job. So that kind of really opened my eyes to, and while I was doing that, I was volunteering at my mom's school while she was a principal. So I was always working with kids. I'd always been working with kids my entire life growing up. So I just kind of decided to go that route and made the leap and went back to get my master's degree.
So when you first get into what is formal coaching, obviously when you were in high school and you're coaching the rec team, and as you said, didn't think of it as coaching, but it obviously was your start. But once you formally get into coaching, what was it about being a coach that made you think, oh, this is really what I want to do? I can see myself doing this for my professional career.
Yeah, so I think for me it was definitely the extra connections with the kids, because I was coaching the same kids that I was teaching every day. And I'm a teacher in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is a low-income inner-city district, and it just really allowed me to, a middle-class white guy who grew up in the suburbs, to really kind of start to bond with these kids that maybe otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. And I think that's what drew me in initially. And then once I figured out, that this was kind of a very nice, if you will, second job that goes along with teaching really well, with the hours especially. I said this was kind of just a natural fit for me. And so that's when I kind of dug in deeper and said I got to get as involved as possible.
Was there any thought, you said you were a baseball kid growing up, was there any thought of being a baseball coach, or when did the shift to basketball coaching as opposed to baseball coaching take place?
Yeah, I definitely never wanted to be a baseball coach. Even though I love baseball and I have a lot of respect for baseball coaches, I just found it very mundane and very boring to me, which is weird because I loved playing it. And I think it was mostly just, I had always grown up watching UConn basketball and the Celtics, and I always just kind of loved the action of the game and the fast pace and the fast movement. And I guess I would say that it kind of transitioned over into college, because I would go and watch, our college team play, and sometimes our college team practice on like a Sunday morning, and I wasn't a manager or anything, or wasn't involved. I was just going to watch it. So I think it was
you were dedicated, man. Holy cow.
Yeah, no, I just loved going and being in the gym and just watching. I
played sometimes. I didn't want to go to those practices.
Yeah, no, I definitely was a little weird. And sometimes the guys would have me like go in, and I thought they wanted me to work them out, but they really meant that they wanted me to work out with them. And those are the days that I did not like being in the gym.
I understand. I can understand exactly where you're coming from with that. Did you room with one of the players, or what was your connection to? You just got to be friends with guys because they were in the dorm? Or what was it? How did you get connected to those guys on the team? How did you become friends with them?
Yeah, I had I don't know what it was, but that year there was like 3 or 4. My year there was 3 or 4 basketball players who were also history majors. So I was just in a bunch of classes with the basketball guys, and I just kind of naturally started talking to them about stuff, and and then I would go watch the games and talk to them about the games, and then they'd be like, hey, why don't you come see a practice or whatever, and they'd ask the coach, and they said yeah, and so I would do that.
That's very cool. Yeah. I think it's funny because we talked to obviously all different kinds of coaches at all different levels, and I love the backstories of how people get into coaching. And I think yours is pretty unique in that your playing career ended earlier, obviously, than you would have liked. And yet at the same time, here you are, you get connected to a bunch of guys that are playing on a college team. You're not a manager, which, as we know, that's really a traditional way now that coaches get into the profession, is they go to a college and they become a manager for the team, and then that sort of transitions them. They build relationships with the coaches, both on their own staff and maybe staffs of other coaches, other teams, other programs in their conference, and then they end up getting an opportunity. So you didn't go that route, and it's a pretty unique story. And when you get to that middle school job and you're connecting with those kids, that, as you said, that was one of the things that really attracted you to that and made you think, hey, I can do this. What were 1 or 2 things that right away you were pretty good at, that you felt pretty confident about as a coach? And then we'll follow that up with, what was 1 or 2 things that maybe were really difficult for you initially as a coach?
Sure. So I would say the one thing, or one of the 2 things that was pretty easy for me was the direct connection with the kids, but also being able to connect like education back with the kids, because they weren't just my players, they were my students. And I had I had most of them I had all of them in class, because they were all middle school kids. And so they didn't just look at me as their coach, they looked at me as their history teacher, and who just happens to be their basketball coach. And so I was able to make the connection between understanding how we had like weekly progress reports that we would do, and on their grades and their behavior, and just being able to connect it to it's not basketball is separate than school. It's like it all flows in the same direction, and you got to make sure that both tracks are going the right way. And then I think the second thing was just always like being high energy and excited, because I really loved my job. And I loved the kids that I taught, and those kids were my players. And so for me, it was like the end of the school day, the bell went off and I went right to the locker room, got changed in my gym clothes, and I was out there, ready to go. I was 22 or 23 years old and just excited to be there and excited that, I was able to do this and spend the extra time with the kids.
So building that connection is the key.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, and I think if you ask a lot of coaches, they would say that that's a really important thing to have. And sometimes it doesn't come very naturally. And I was just lucky enough where it came naturally for me. And then obviously I think the two things that I struggled with, would definitely be the X's and O's. That's the, I guess I would say that would be the negative part of not really playing varsity basketball in high school and only playing 2 years of basketball in high school, is that you lose out on, all those practices and different things of when you're learning the X's and O's. So that was, something. And I think when I was 22, I thought, well, in order to be a good coach, I need to know all the X's and O's. I need to know everything about that. And that's not necessarily the case. And then I guess the second thing, let's see, the second thing, there's a lot of things I could struggle with. So I'm trying to narrow it down to one.
Understood.
I guess it would just be like focusing on one thing, like during practice or during the game.
Absolutely.
Just looking, and especially when it comes to like mistakes and like which ones do you correct, which ones do you not correct, and that sort of thing.
I've said this a couple of times on the podcast when I've gotten into this conversation, and I know my very first coaching job, and I was one of those people that I grew up as a basketball player. It did not cross my mind ever that I wanted to be a basketball coach, and not till I finished playing did I start to think, well, maybe I'd like to be a coach. And my very first job, I coached a JV team. And my very first practice, it was just me. So I had no assistants. It was just me and 12 kids. And I remember I ran my first drill. And after like 5 minutes, I just was like, there was a million mistakes in that 5 minutes. How am I possibly ever going to fix that? And I had no idea how to, as you just said, focus in on one thing. And it took me a long time to realize that you can't fix everything that you see that's wrong. And I struggled for a long time that year trying to figure out, how often do I stop play? What do I correct? What do I not correct? What do I let go? And I'm sure that I'm not the only coach who has said this, but I was a pretty bad coach. It was my first year for sure, and I think I was probably better my second year, but that first year for sure, I was probably pretty terrible. I mean, I knew some things about the game, but I had only played for one high school coach and one college coach. Right. And so the things that I knew were the things that I had done as a player, and nobody had really taken me under their wing and said, hey, you got to go out and go to clinics, and you got to study, and you got to watch more film and do all these things. I didn't really do any of that. I just kind of took what I knew from being a player and thought that was going to make me a good coach. And I think if I have one regret, it's that I didn't do more of that early in my career, is to really learn the game and go back and do that. So when you think about yourself in that situation, what did you do to try to grow yourself as a coach? If you did anything, maybe you were like me and you just tried to do the best you could with what you knew already. But when you think about how you went about getting better, how'd you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just boils down to I was really lucky because I wasn't working with some, a volunteer dad who was coaching the middle school team. I was working with somebody who had 40 years of coaching experience. And so a lot of times I just shut up and listened. And just was a sponge in practice and a sponge, during games, and just kind of learning the ins and outs of everything. And then the second thing is, I think by that point, because, it's a big commitment coaching like the 55 games and then volunteering at the high school level, I started just, reading a ton of books. Podcasts weren't essentially really that big back then, but I would occasionally watch like YouTube videos, and a couple of my, like the head coach at the middle school gave me like a couple of his like Hubie Brown like VHSs and DVDs because we still had VHSs in the school. So I could watch those during a prep and stuff. So I guess not really attending the clinic as much, but definitely just trying to be a sponge and get as much information into me as possible.
Did you write stuff down? Like, did you have a notebook? Did you keep it on a computer file?
Yeah.
What was your system for keeping track?
Yeah, I still have them. I have like 3 or 4 composition notebooks that I just filled up with stuff from videos, stuff from books. I obviously like dog-eared and highlighted a bunch of the books that I have too. So I think that's kind of like the teacher to me, just making sure that I'm getting down as much information as possible and then retain it later.
What's your favorite memory from that first year or two?
So I'm going to probably say this a bunch during this podcast, but I was so fortunate and lucky that the middle school team, we ended up, I think we won about 46 or 47 of the 55 games, and we won the city championship, and we won like 3 or 4 tournaments against like AAU teams, which is pretty cool as a school team. And then that same year, the high school that I was volunteering for made the state championship game. We unfortunately lost, but I think those were like 2, along with all the countless memories that I have with all the kids from that year and stuff. But besides that, it was definitely just experiencing, winning on those levels and success on that level in my first year of coaching. Obviously, that helps you fall in love with it even more, I think.
Yeah, winning, it's one of those things that is winning the most critical part of being a good coach. I think most coaches would argue no, that it's the impact that you can have on players. But I always have this conversation with parents whenever, and I've coached mostly my kids' AAU teams, and I always say, look, winning is not the most important thing, but winning certainly helps make it a more positive experience. It's easier to generate a positive experience when some wins go along with it. You have to work a lot harder to create a positive experience for your kids and for your team if you don't win many games. And so right. I think those two things, it's important to keep in mind and keep it in perspective, but it's also important to remember that winning some games does help along the way for sure.
Absolutely.
So when you think about those first experiences and you get an opportunity to work with a great mentor, which not everybody gets an opportunity to do. You get an opportunity to work and coach the kids that you saw during the day as a teacher, which not everybody gets to do. And then you get an opportunity to coach at the college level pretty early in your career. So just describe how that came to be, what that process looked like, maybe something you remember about the interview, and just again, how fortunate you were to be put into that position.
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress that enough. How lucky I am. Like I said earlier, it was just because I was volunteering and around. I met the head coach there, Mitch Oliver, and because I met him, we made that kind of connection. And because he was recruiting one of our players, I was able to get the interview. I don't think it wasn't necessarily my memory from the interview would not distinctly be anything in the interview. I don't really remember a lot, to be quite honest with you, because I was so shocked that I was actually getting a college coaching interview that I really wasn't sure what was going on. I probably stuttered around and sounded like an idiot, to be honest. But I just remember when I left and I was with one of my buddies. I was driving him and dropping him off somewhere, and he stayed in the car. I told him, I was like, it'll probably be like 30 minutes. They're probably going to hate it, and I'll just come back out. And it was like 90 minutes later, I'd been in there, and I walked out, and I just got in the car, and he was like, how'd it go? And I just remember I turned to him, and I was like, I think I got the job. I was so nervous that I don't remember if that's exactly what he said. And so, yeah, obviously I did end up getting the job, and I was extremely lucky about that. And it was such a, like you said, such a really, really good experience, so early on in my career. And once again, I landed in a place that had a ton of success before I got there. They had the most home wins in a row in the entire NCAA throughout all the 3 divisions when I arrived. and they had already won like 3 or 4 conference championships, and they had made it to the Elite Eight. So when I got in there, I coached there, like I said, for 2 years, and I played in the conference championship game both years. I lost the first year, and we won it the second year. So again, just extremely lucky and extremely fortunate to get to the places that I ended up landing, which was great.
What were 1 or 2 things that when you first got that job and you step in to college coaching, what's something that you didn't expect that ended up being a big part of your job? Because I think one of the things that you always hear about when, especially people who go into college coaching, they end up getting a lot of things that they have to do that are put onto their plate that they didn't really realize were part of being a college basketball coach. So there's anything that kind of fits that description for you?
Oh yeah. I did. I definitely knew the educational aspect just because I was a teacher and I had friends, like I said, in college that were on the team. So I understood the responsibilities that assistants have with like making sure guys are in study hall and going to classes. But all of the other things that like doing the lawn, like putting all the jerseys in the wash in the dryer and folding them before the game, and then sweeping and wet mopping the floor before each of our home games, and just making sure the guys come back from the calf at the right time, or making sure the calf's open if practice goes late. It's just like all the things that you wouldn't, like you said, you wouldn't really think of. But they were all things that I weirdly enjoyed. I never really complained about it. I liked it because it was a very stressful, job just because of all the work that it was and the work that we put in and making sure that we were like successful. So like those little moments where I would be like in the washroom by myself or put my headphones on and I'm wet mopping the floor before games were like my moments where like I could really soak it in and remind myself like how lucky I was that I even was where I am and that I had this opportunity. And so yeah, I would say it's all those things. And while it sounds like I'm complaining about them, I was, actually really happy that I had those moments.
What did you learn from that experience that you've carried with you in your subsequent coaching endeavors?
I think if there's 2 things that I would have to say that I learned. Number 1 would be that loyalty is currency. That was like something I remember my head coach there, Mitch, would always say, to me. He had been around a lot of different places and he had so many connections. He'd always just say, loyalty is currency. If you stay loyal to your beginnings and to where you came from and your mentors and the people you've met along the way, he's like, you're going to go places no matter where you go and what level you want to be at. So that would be the first one. And then I think the second thing that's always stuck to me is the amount of, I knew how hard, a Jim Calhoun worked at UConn because that's such a high level. But I think my naive self in like high school and in college when I was watching, watching those D1 games and thinking about like, our school was D2 and there's like D3 and JUCO. I was like, those must be pretty easy jobs. It's not as the highest of levels and yada, yada, yada. And just after being there for 2 years, I have so much respect for every single like coach, obviously at all levels, but even the lower the level, it's almost like my respect level goes up because they have so many hats that they have to wear on a daily basis. And I constantly remind myself of that. And I'm a big advocate for the lower levels. And I have tons of friends who coach at those levels. And I'm always trying to boost, those levels up. My players in high school even joke about it because I'm always talking about like, are you looking at any D3s? You looking at any D3s? Like, coach, like, what are you talking about? I was like, hey man, don't sleep on D3s. Come on. So yeah, those would be the 2 things.
It's funny that you say that because I know I've had conversations with several Division III coaches, one with John Baines, who's the head coach at Elmhurst in the state of Illinois. And I remember him telling me that he sat down with a recruit, but this was just one specific story, but he said this happens to him all the time, that he'll sit down with a player and maybe the player is a kid who's maybe he's got some Division II looks, or he's a kid who could possibly play at a higher level than Division III, and he's having a conversation with them, and the kid and their parents say, "Oh, I'm way better than the Division III level." And John would say to the kid, like, "Have you ever even seen a Division III game? Have you ever watched a game?" And he's like, 75% of the time, the answer to that is no. Right. And he's like, "Well, why don't you come watch us play, or why don't you come and show up at one of our open gyms and actually play against our guys and see what it's like?" And I think that people have no idea how good you have to be to play college basketball at any level. I mean, forget about Division I. I mean, we're talking whether it's NAI or Division III or Division II, whatever. To be able to set foot on a college basketball floor, you have to be a really good player. And I think that one of the themes that's come through our podcast, and we've had a number of people that have shared the idea that what's most important is you have to find the right fit for you as a college athlete. And that could be school and academics. That could be the basketball coach. It could be the program. It could be the campus. It could be the location. But there's a place that's going to fit the type of experience that you're looking for. And I think that's what I hear you saying is that, look, it's not just especially if you're on social media a lot, you see so much of the Division I or bust mentality. So many people with blessed to receive this offer and thankful for that offer. And that's what you see all the time. And if you're a kid, that's got to be hard. That's got to be really hard to scroll through and look and see guys that you play against in the summertime in AAU or this or that. And they're getting this offer and that. And you're just sitting there going, well, where's my offer? When you might have a bunch of really good Division III schools that really want you to come there. And you can have a great basketball experience. You can have a great academic experience. And it's just interesting that people sometimes downplay how good those levels of basketball are. And I think you make a great point. Are you tired of slipping and sliding on the court and sticky sheets just aren't giving you grip? Grip Spritz solves this problem without having to lick your hand to clean your shoes. Grip Spritz is used by countless AAU, high school and college programs, semi-pro teams, as well as NCAA athletes and G League players. Unlike other products, Grip Spritz has solutions for individual players, not just entire teams. We've used Grip Spritz at our Head Start basketball camps and players love it. To keep you and your team from slipping and sliding, visit gripspritz.net to learn more. When you're there and you're going through that experience, what's your career path looking like at that point? What are you thinking? Because obviously you start out, you're coaching at a middle school, you're teaching, different career path than being a college coach. So as you get into college coaching, what's your thought process on kind of where you think you might end up or where you think you might go next, and how do you compare those two levels and just the experiences you had?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I look back on one of those composition notebooks that I had, and I was reading some book that told me to write down a goal, and I wrote going to be a head coach of a D1 college by the age of 28. So that's how naive I was when I first got that job. I just thought automatically like, oh, I'm an assistant coach at the college level, and my team is very successful, and we're nationally ranked. Like this is gonna be easy. Obviously, it's not. And to talk about like the path or whatever, I kind of realized that to be, you look back at that goal and to be a Division I, basketball coach or a head coach, I'm not gonna be a teacher. And at that point, I was 3 or 4 years into teaching, and I had absolutely fallen in love with it. And I didn't want to have to give that up. Like I was able to do my job as an assistant at a D3 level with, having my teaching job. But when I weighed the two and realized that I would have to give one up for the other, and I also realized, like we were talking about before, how much work it is just at the D3 level, and how busy I was, that I knew I kind of had to reevaluate the path that I wanted to go down. And, that's kind of where I looked at it and I said, I only volunteered at the high school level. I really didn't get to be in every single practice, and I wasn't on the bench in the games. And I said, I think the perfect fit or the perfect mesh for me would be to find an assistant coaching job at the high school level, and I'd be able to keep my teaching job and do both. And so that's kind of where I am right now.
So when you think about that piece of it and how important the teaching aspect of it is to you, and you think to that first experience where you were coaching the kids on the team and then you're also seeing them during the school day, how much of a challenge is it for you to be teaching one place and coaching in another in terms of building the connection between you and your players? I know when I was coaching, I taught in the elementary school, coached as a varsity assistant. Our schools were literally right across the parking lot, and there was still some part of me that I felt disconnected because our other two coaches on staff were in the high school, and so if there was a change or something, they could all communicate face to face, and I would have to get a phone call or an email, or somebody would have to run a message over to me. And I always found it to be a little bit challenging. And I think now if you look at the high school ranks, there's a lot more coaches today who don't coach in the school where they coach, either because they teach at another school or maybe they're not teachers altogether and they have another job and then they come in and coach. So just how do you approach that relationship building part of it, and just talk a little bit about how you think about being in the building versus not being in the building?
Sure. I think I absolutely love the setup that I have, because I teach in a, like I said, in an urban inner city, low income neighborhood, and then I teach literally a mile and a half down the road at Fairfield Prep, which is the polar opposite when it comes to socioeconomical backgrounds and things like that. And so at first I was a little worried about it, because I was like, okay, this is two completely different groups of kids, not just age wise, but just background wise, and in general. And what ended up happening is really, really awesome. And it's something that I take with me on a daily basis. And that I remember always is that it opened my eyes to all of these kids are, when it comes down to it, they're just kids. They want similar things. They want to be liked by their peers. They want to be respected by you. They want to feel like they're cared about and feel like they're safe where they are. And that socioeconomic piece that I was so worried about really doesn't come into play when it comes to just kind of relating to a teenager. And that was what was really, really eye-opening and made the experience just that much better than what I was already kind of expecting when I got the job and took it and decided to do those two things. And I think that's really a really cool opportunity that I have to learn every day, and just be reminded of that. And I would say that when you obviously there's a lot of pluses to being, a teacher in the school that you coach in. I know that just from firsthand experience with coaching and teaching at the middle school level. It's easier to make sure that, you're checking up on grades and behavior and expectations that we have in the classroom. And that's easy to do if you're there and you're coworkers with the teachers and stuff. And I think it's also easy if you're there to, you'll have other students who are going to likely, if they like you and you like your class and they respect you, are going to support you just like they would support their friends and their teammates. So there's obviously a huge advantage of that. And we're lucky enough on our staff at Fairfield Prep that both of our freshman coaches are, one's I believe in admissions, and the other one is I think actually they're both in admissions now that I think about it. And then one of them does like some mentoring and stuff with the kids as well, and goes on their retreats with them. So we have that connection, on our staff, which I think is really vital.
How do you go about building those relationships when you're not spending as much time with the kids during the day? You're seeing them during practice and obviously team activities, but what do you personally do to help facilitate those types of relationships? Is it mostly built up through small daily conversations on the way to the practice floor, in the locker room, sitting down before games? Is that mostly how you do it, or do you have something formal that you do?
No, I wouldn't say I have anything formal. I mean, it really starts out like when I first got the job, I went to all the fall sports stuff that I knew the kids played. So like, I would go there, and I do that still. Like I try to get to as many home games as we have to show face and see the kids and have them, see us, because I think that's a really important part of like your culture, but just building the community feel that you want at a school. And then, when it's in the season, I, just because of my job, it allows me to kind of be around after the 3:00 bell. So, I usually just, even though my practice or, our practice might not be till like 4:30, I'll just go right there right after school, and they might be shooting around, and I just hang out with them. And, like you said, have small conversations before practice, after practice. And then if, they're spring athletes, I try to go to their spring sports and support them as much as possible there.
I think that support outside of the given sport that you coach, I think it's an underrated aspect of building relationships with kids, because we always hear coaches talk about wanting to make sure that the kids know that they care about them as a person and not just as an athlete. But I think it goes a long way to be able to participate and show an interest in the other activities that the kids have. That could be, again, a spring sport, or maybe they're involved in some other activity. I think whenever you get an opportunity to go, and I can say that as a teacher and as a coach over the years, occasionally I've been invited to go see, maybe it's a kid's performance or they want me to go see a different game. And whenever I do that, I feel like it deepens that connection that I have with the kid in a way that I think it's hard to do in just about, I think that's one of the best ways that you can really show the kids that you do care about them as more than just a basketball player. When you do that, it builds the type of relationship that allows you to get more out of them as an athlete. And it also gives you an opportunity to have a relationship that's going to last beyond just the season or beyond just their career as a high school athlete. But you're going to be able to, 10 years down the road, they're going to be calling you up and talking about their wedding or telling you about the new job they got, or that they had their first child, or whatever it might be. And really, again, as we talked about earlier, that's really what coaching is all about. So when you think about what you're doing there at Fairfield Prep right now, and you think about trying to build a positive high school program and an experience for your players, what do you do to try to build the team culture there? What do you guys do as a staff to be able to get the kids to buy into the team concept of basketball that we all know is so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to a pure practice standpoint, I think it's just really important to make practice competitive but fun at the same time. And I think if you have a bunch of athletes who are looking forward to going to practice because they know that it's going to be fun and they know that it's going to be an area where they can compete with their peers and their friends, I think that's a really natural way of getting buy-in and creating that positive foundation for a culture. And then obviously you have all your things that I think we've all done before as coaches, the dinners, the going bowling, or going to another local college game. We're on the same campus as Fairfield University, so we'll go and watch their boys and girls basketball games as like a bonding outside of basketball. So that's obviously important as well. And I also think at the same time that I think there's a stigma out there that as coaches, or for some coaches, that you want your players to respect you and almost kind of fear you. And this whole thing about, I don't care if my players don't like me, but I want them to respect me. I think that it's a very underrated and very important aspect of building a culture and building a successful one, is making sure that your players like you. Now, that not talking about like going out of your way to like please them and do something that is not against, or not something that you would normally do. But I think it's important that you build relationships with your players so that they like you, because if they don't like you, I don't really know how you do all the other stuff that I just kind of mentioned.
It's so true. It's one of those things I think that is often underrated in terms of, if you go every day, if you show up as a player, and anybody who's listening out there who's played sports at any level, I'm sure eventually you ran into a coach that you didn't like, and it wasn't nearly as much fun to go to practice or to even be on that team when you were with a coach that you didn't like. And I think it's a great point that if you set up a situation where it's a positive experience for the kids that are part of your team, then you're doing something right, and you're giving them the type of experience that they're going to want, it's going to make other kids want to be involved in your program, and that's going to lead to longer-term success when you're creating the type of environment that kids want to be a part of. And I think, that transcends sports. It doesn't matter. You can think about that as a teacher as well. You want to be a teacher that the kids like, because if they like you, you're much more likely to be able to get more out of them and help them to learn better and all the things that go along with being a great teacher. To me, that's all so important when you're talking about having an impact on young people, which, as we've said, it's really what coaching is all about. When you guys are putting together your practice plans, I think one of the things that coaches sometimes try to figure out and try to balance within their team is, how do you strike a balance between competitiveness in your practices and still building that team camaraderie where you have two players are going at it, competing for playing time, play the same position, and you want them to be ultra competitive in practice, and yet you also want them to support one another. So when one's on the floor, the other one's up and cheering for that player, and you want them to be great teammates. What does that look like at Fairfield Prep when you think about making a practice competitive and yet at the same time maintaining that team camaraderie?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I would first lead with that. We are very lucky at Fairfield Prep, and we have a ton of kids who are just really good kids, and are very competitive, but at the same time, they're all friends. For the most part, a lot of them have grown up together and played sports together. They're most of their young lives, so they kind of know each other, and they know when to compete and when to not cross the line, and make sure that whatever you're doing, it kind of stays on the floor, and it doesn't leak out of the gym and become a problem somewhere else. But that's not always the case. Like I said, we've been lucky the 4 or 5 years that I've been there, that we've had good groups. But if there is that animosity, I think it's just really important. Again, like, we have to, at the end of the day, we're coaches, but we're teachers, and we have to teach skills, not just like basketball skills, but life skills. And so I think it's really important to introduce players to competitiveness, and then talk about and make sure that they understand that the competitiveness can't leak into other things. That competitiveness is there to try and create, whoever it is, the two teams or the two athletes, they're trying to make each other better by competing and going at it, and that's the goal. That competitiveness is positive, and so therefore the entire experience should be positive, and therefore all the interactions should be positive.
Do you chart drills? Do you keep track of wins and losses? How do you guys go about keeping track of who's winning and losing within a practice setting? Is that something that you guys do there at Fairfield? Yeah.
So, we do a ton of competitive stuff where we keep score, and there's two teams. We also do, we compete, where the whole team is competing, at 1 through 15 against the clock or against the score that we made up, in other drills. So I would say probably 90%, if not more, of our practice is all competitive. And we don't just keep score with points. We keep points, meaning baskets made. I think it's really important to keep points of the things that you're trying to stress to the players in the gym on what's important to you and your goals for those practices. So yeah, everything has a score. Everything is measured. And that way, not only is there a competitiveness in each of the things that we're doing, but there's also, team building and team bonding that's mixed into all those things as well.
How does that break down in terms of the roles for assistant coaches during practice as far as writing things down or keeping track, or how do you guys delegate those responsibilities within a drill where you're balancing out who's coaching and sharing things, who's writing stuff down? How do you guys go about just dividing up those tasks?
Yeah, we usually have a manager who's doing the score on the clock, and because we are lucky enough to practice at Fairfield University, we have like a jumbotron. So there's a bunch of different a bunch of different digits that can be plugged in there, so we can mostly keep track of everything, so all of the players can see it throughout the whole drill. So we're lucky in that way, and then coaches' roles. I mean, we try to especially when we're in those 4-on-4 or 3-on-3, 5-on-5 competitiveness drills where we're keeping score and there's a winner and there's a loser, we kind of, as coaches, just sit back and observe. I think that's a really important part of coaching, and I think it's the part that's glanced over the most. So we kind of sit back, and if we're going to talk to a player or assess a player and give some feedback, we make sure that the feedback is on the side when the player comes off. And that way the drill doesn't get interrupted. And, the only talking that's being done on the court should be among the players and stuff like that. We really try we're not always good at it, but especially me, but we try not to yell out commands and things that we want the players to do. Because if you look at like any study that shows the more yelling that's going on, especially when the yelling is like action verbs or things that they want someone to do, and it's like their name followed by dribble or whatever, it's always a negative thing. And it usually leads to something that's negative because it's a distraction. And it's one that we actually have control over as coaches, so we can take that away.
So what does the feedback then look like? Because I know that this is one of the things that I continue to always have a hard time with when I'm coaching my teams, especially because oftentimes I'm in a situation where it might be me at practice by myself. So I'm the only coach that's there. And if I'm running the practice and I'm in the drill and then I'm trying to call a kid over and have a conversation like you described as one person, and there's a lot of coaches out there, especially if you're coaching at an AAU team or you're coaching at a youth level, and there's a lot of coaches that only are one person and they don't have a whole staff that can do some of these things. So what does the feedback look like when a player comes off the floor? What are some of the things that you might be looking to point out to them? Are you looking back at maybe a decision they made and asking them a question like, hey, why did you make that decision? Or what did you see there? Or what could you maybe have done differently? How do you phrase that with a player as you're talking to them to try to help them learn what it is that you're trying to get them to understand?
All right, man, you hit a passion with me right now, so I'm just
I'm ready.
I'm trying not to go off on a tangent here, but I think the feedback first starts with like the practice plan aspect. So if you have a drill and you're going 8 minutes, and this goes back to what I was saying before about focusing on that one or two things, I think every drill on your practice plan needs to have like two objectives, two things that you're working on in that drill, because that's really kind of makes the most sense with when we're talking about high school, middle school, elementary school kids. Is if we want them to improve and get better, we've got to give them one or two areas to focus on in these little segmented blocks of time that we have in practice. So that being said, if you do that the right way and you're saying, all right, listen, in this drill, we're going to focus on decision making and your footwork when you're finishing at the rim. So footwork and decision making in those two areas. Then when you need to give feedback, you can, like you said, pull a kid over to the side or go over to them while they're on the side. And the feedback should only be about what the objectives were. Even if the kid did something wrong, but it's outside of those two objectives, it shouldn't be talked about. So that in that way, make sure your feedback's focused. You're probably going to not have to give as much feedback to as many people as possible, because now it's a little bit more focused, where the mistakes isn't I'm going to address every mistake or I'm going to address all of these mistakes. It's I'm only addressing the mistakes that are made on our objectives. And at the same time, and you brought it up before, the feedback needs to be quick and it needs to be player-led, meaning you've got to ask a leading question or some type of question that's going to get the player thinking. And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out where I got this from, and I'm blanking on it, but I think we've all run into this as teachers and as coaches when you ask a player a question and then there's that really awkward moment of silence and they look at you like blinking and they have no idea what you're talking about. The amount of times that I've done this, and I'm sure we all have, is we start to feel bad and we want to help them. So we give them an answer, or we give them a hint, or we give them another leading question that's going to lead them there. And I just heard it like this past week, I think on Monday, but it was talking about that moment of awkwardness and silence is the learning process. And we need to at least give 60 seconds, even though it's going to feel like a really long 60 seconds of awkwardness, to let them think, ponder, and give an answer. Now, in your example, if you're the only one there and you don't have 60 seconds to just stand there, I think it's really good to ask the question. If they can't answer it in 10 or 15, say, hey, think about it and come back with me for an answer. I'm going to be back here in 2-3 minutes. So that's my long-winded answer on feedback and what I think it should look like.
That's a really good answer. And I think it's something that coaches have to be really intentional about how they go about giving feedback and really thinking through, as you said, what's the focus of the drill? That's number one. And then number two, if you're going to talk to a kid and you're going to give them feedback, you got to make sure that what you give them is something actionable that they can do. And so by asking a question, I think what you're trying to get the kid to do is really think about, well, hey, what did I do and what could I have done differently? Because too often I think we say things sometimes as coaches, and I know I'm as guilty of this as anybody, is we say things that we sometimes do it for our own benefit to hear ourselves talk. And it's not things that the kid can really put to use to help them to do whatever it is that we want them to do better. We're just kind of talking to hear ourselves talk. And it's really easy to fall into that. It's really easy to fall into that trap if you're not intentional about what you're doing and what you're saying. And I think one of the things that I really improved, I feel, as a coach several years ago when I started using questions instead of statements in my coaching. And by no means am I perfect at that, but I do find myself asking a lot more questions now than I ever would have 5 or 10 years ago for sure as a coach. And I think that, to your point, it can get messy. It can get uncomfortable. I think you have to be okay with a little bit of chaos in your practice, and it has to be messy in order for real learning to take place. Because I always think about parents in the stands and the number of people that in a 6-year-old or 7-year-old or an 8-year-old basketball game, the number of parents that are screaming directions at their kids. And obviously the most common direction is they're screaming, shoot it. And then you think about those kids and what their ability to process that is. First of all, they're trying to play. They probably can't even hear you, number one. And if they do hear you, now they're completely distracted from whatever it is that they were trying to do. But not only that, but you're really stealing the kid's ability to learn how to make decisions. And ultimately, no matter whether it's a coach or it's a parent or even if it's a teammate, if somebody has to give you instruction in order for you to be able to make a decision, by the time you make that decision based on what somebody else says to you, it's probably the wrong decision by that point because you missed the window of opportunity that that person who's giving you the instruction saw. And so I just think we have to, as coaches, one of the biggest things that's most important to me is that we empower kids to make decisions, to be able to learn how to make decisions. And clearly, our role as a coach is to help them make better ones. But if we're always making the decisions for them, they're never going to grow as players. And I think one of the misperceptions that you have to educate, and I'm sure you see this on the AAU level when you're coaching, is a lot of times when you have a coach who maybe isn't putting on a show on the sidelines, let's put it that way, but they're just standing quietly and they're giving that kind of feedback like we just described. Like a lot of times parents are like, well, this coach is disengaged. They're not doing what they're supposed to do because they want to see what they see on TV, right? They want to see somebody screaming and waving their arms and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, when real coaching is a lot more subtle than that. So when you talk to parents, whether it's at the high school level or whether it's through your AAU program, do you ever have those conversations with parents about just what kind of coaching it is that you're trying to do within your programs.
It's something that I think that we need to do. I don't think we do a good job at that, like right now. I think it could be like a kind of an awkward conversation because you don't want to veer over to the I'm telling you how to, parent your kid, or I'm telling you how to act as a parent. So I think it's one of those things that we try to avoid as coaches. But I think you're right. I think it does need to be addressed. Just another thing that I just read about or listened about was a coach that does that wasn't for high school, but it was for, I believe, an elementary school, like a fourth grade AAU travel team. And he had the kids fill out a sheet at the first practice, and it was a lot of it was about, some of it was about them and the team, and then the last part was, what do you expect of your parents? And so they wrote all of these things, like, what do you like that your parents do at a game? What do you dislike? And now a high school kid probably wouldn't answer these truthfully, but these fourth graders, how they are. I mean,
right, for sure. Yeah, that's going to be the honest truth. Absolutely.
And the coach presented that at the parent meeting, and the parents could read what their kid wrote about them and what their kid likes about their behavior and dislikes, or likes just in general when he's at a game, or dislikes. So I think that's a really important way. I think that's a really good way of not putting yourself in the middle of it. You're just presenting some of the facts that probably aren't ever talked about in your house or whatever it might be. And I think that's important. And I think it's also important, and it's really hard to coordinate in things, but I think that we need to do a better job as coaches of using our platform and bringing in people who are going to talk about like mental health and like the mental side of not just being an athlete, but like a student athlete, and then being a teenager, and having that be a part of your program as well. Because I think that, a lot of parents are not aware of mental health, or might just think it's one of those things that's overblown in our society on social media and stuff. But I think it's so important to connect your program with that and connect the parents with that, because I think that would, and I don't want to refer to it as behavior because then it's like judgmental, but I think that would eliminate a lot of what happens in the stands when parents, their eyes are like open to the ins and outs of how their child is really like thinking and what they're going through.
I do think there's a disconnect there between what parents perceive that they're doing by engaging in some of the behaviors that we just talked about versus what the actual result of their actions are. Obviously, a parent who's yelling things in the stands, if they're just coaching their kid, they think that they're helping, right? And that's their intent. Their intent isn't a negative intent. They're not trying to screw their kid up. They're not trying to screw up the teams, what the team is trying to do. But yet at the same time, you could completely understand that they, even though their intentions are good, they're not quite comprehending that what they're actually doing is having a negative effect on their kid. And obviously all kids are different. Some kids like to hear voices cheering for them and whatever, and other kids would rather mom or dad just sit completely silently and that nobody even knows that they're there. And so it's interesting how, and obviously if you've been around youth sports, you've been around high school sports, you see all different types of parenting styles. You see all different types of people and how they react to coaches and officials and teams and games. And some of the behavior that you see is just, it's absolutely unbelievable. And, and yet at the same time, I think you see those are the people that sometimes get noticed, and we don't always notice the 80% or 85% or 90% or whatever that percentage is of parents who are doing it the right way, who are cheering for their kids, who are cheering for other kids on the team, who are not yelling at officials and doing all those things. And I think sometimes we forget to highlight the people out there that are doing things right. And there are a huge percentage of people out there who are doing youth sports right. It's just sometimes those bad apples are the loudest ones, and so those are the ones that we tend to notice, unfortunately. And it's part of it. I don't know that it's ever going to go away. I do think that by continuing to educate parents the best we can and getting the message out there and talking about it, I hope that at some point, if we can persuade one or two more parents not to be yelling at their kids during games, then we've at least accomplished something. We've helped one or two of those kids to have a better and more positive experience. And I think those surveys would be super interesting to read, because I know at one point, I can't remember where I saw this or read it, but it talked about that if high school kids, if they could have anything from their parents, the number one thing they would want is for them just to sit silently. It's pretty telling, right, Garrett? I mean, it's pretty telling that a kid feels that way. And then you think about yourself. Would you want somebody showing up to your job as a teacher and yelling at you, hey, pick up the chalk now, or why aren't you helping, Johnny needs help. Why are you helping Susie? Those kind of, like, nobody would want to work under that kind of pressure. And yet that's what we put 7-8-year-old kids into sometimes. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of your other things that you've done to be able to help grow the game of basketball and have a bigger impact. And you have your PhD basketball AAU program, and you have your Share the Game newsletter and all the things that you're putting together for coaches that can help them to grow and improve as a coach. I don't know which one you want to talk about first, but you go ahead and pick which one you want to talk first, and then we'll dive into that, and then we can get into the other one after.
Sure. Yeah. No. I think on the AAU level and with PhD basketball, like I love my program. I think in a hectic world that is the world of AAU basketball, it's hard to find a good program that's led by a good person that has good coaches, good parents, and good kids in it. So I'm lucky to be one of the coaches there. I'm going into my 7th year as an AAU coach and of the head of player development there, which is awesome. And then for the Share the Game aspect, I kind of just started that during COVID because I was bored out of my mind like everybody else was when we were locked down. And it's something that I'm so happy I did it because it helped me organize myself a little bit more during that time, putting all the stuff together for the newsletter and having some and the blog posts and putting some of my etches and sketches on pieces of paper all throughout my office, putting them onto like Fast Draw and actually printing, like having them in my playbook was really helpful. And then I'm continuing to do it now. I'm going to continue to do it going forward, but it's just a weekly newsletter and then a weekly resources with like videos from clinics that I've done or been to or watched and enjoyed. And the newsletter is not anything that's really, there's not any, opinions. It's not my opinion on basketball or my opinion on this. It's just the things that I've run into during my short coaching career and things that I stole and got from all the mentors that I've kind of been an assistant under. And then, like I said, some of the stuff is things that I created. As I've at Fairfield Prep, like I have a lot of freedom to do a lot of things, and I work under a great coach, Mike Papali, and he kind of lets me do my thing. So I'm always creating different, charts or different things that might make my job a little bit easier or Mike's job as the head coach a little bit easier and going from there. And so whenever I create something like that, I always just share it out to whoever signed up for the newsletter. What's
your process for putting together the newsletter in terms of how do you organize it? How do you decide what goes in one week, what doesn't go in one week? Is it stuff that you're coming across during the time since the previous newsletter? Is it a database of stuff that you already have that you're just kind of picking and choosing what to put in? How do you go about curating that content?
Yeah. So actually what I do is I run a poll on Twitter every Monday morning, and it runs till Wednesday, and it has 2 options as a topic. And I've been doing that since the first week of the newsletter. And so I don't really know the topic until Thursday. And then when I wake up Thursday, it's either like, oh, I have a bunch of stuff on that, or I really wish that didn't win because now I have a lot of work to do.
Right.
But like I said, it's great because I have a long list of topics or ideas that I got from some fellow coaches and then some other people that follow me on Twitter. And so I have this list, and some of the things I have, like I said, and some of the things I haven't thought about or haven't done. And so when those things win, it allows me to, develop as a coach and further my, knowledge of whatever the topic might be. And then when it's something that I already have, it allows me to go back and fine tune it. If it needs fine tuning, trim some, add some, and then I go from there. So whatever wins is what's written about by me or posted by me, and then I go out there and I find a lot of basically the newsletter on Friday is just that, and then any announcements that I might have about the clinics that are coming up that people should sign up for on Fridays, and on Mondays, which is the weekly resources. Whatever the theme was on Friday, it's just a bunch of videos, resources that I have or that I found or created on the topic, and I send that out on Monday mornings.
On average, how long does it take you to put those two things together?
It really doesn't take me that, like, a couple hours on a Thursday night. Well, now I'm watching Thursday Night Football, which is great. And because I posted at 6:30 on Friday morning, so it's only a couple hours on Thursday, and then depending on the topic for the resources, I might have a lot of stuff on it, or I might go back and have to watch a couple clinics or read a couple articles on something or whatever it might be, and then I kind of put those together and decide if it's something that I like and that's good for sending out to everybody else.
What was the best way you found to build momentum and get coaches to know what you were doing? Obviously, social media, big part of that, and being able to grow it through Twitter. But how did you first start out by reaching out to coaches that you knew and say, hey, I'm putting this together, will you subscribe? Did you just put it generally out on social media? What was your process for letting coaches know that it was out there, that it was a resource that they could tap into?
Yeah, I had a group of coaches that I had met we actually during COVID started I didn't start it, but this group of coaches started it called Beer and Basketball. It was every Friday night, and then we were met for like every Friday during COVID and like the quarantining. And so I had like a pretty strong group of like 20, 25 fellow coaches that I had met and that I had built a pretty good relationship with. So they kind of were the ones who helped me like first signing up, and then helped kind of spread the word on social media about it. And then, since then it's at the beginning just to get people to follow me so that they could get the information. I did a lot of like giveaways of things that I had that I would email out to a list of 100, 200 people. And, in order to be entered, they had to retweet it. And so just kind of spread the word and share the hashtag, share the game, which is what the hashtag is that I use on social media. And that kind of just grew from there. And then eventually I had it where I could have like a Google form or a Google sign up sheet that I just kind of tweeted out every day or every other day at the same time, that just kind of every once in a while would get retweeted by somebody who had a lot of followers, and then people would sign up. So
what kind of feedback have you been getting from coaches on that?
A lot of positive feedback. A lot of people just happy that I'm sharing it. A lot of the feedback that I love is coaches sharing their stuff, because now I get to like pick somebody else's brain for free, which is the whole point of the Share the Game movement anyway. So I love that, and I love it. Hasn't happened too often, but I would hope it starts happening more, and I'm going to try to keep asking it. But I've had 2 times where a topic had been talked about that was not necessarily opinionated, but just one way of thinking versus another, and I've had 2 interactions that were awesome, just kind of challenging my thoughts in the newsletter, which is great because it just allows me to rethink it and evaluate it and make sure I have a good argument for it. And sometimes the best thing that can happen to you as like a coach or as a person in general is have an idea challenged and then have to back it up. And if you can't do a good job backing it up, then I think you gotta reevaluate your thought process on it.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about the game of basketball and coaching is that there's no one right way to do anything. And so when you have people that have a difference of opinion, I know that I had Dave Love, the NBA shooting coach, on the podcast. Yep. This was way back towards the beginning, and was talking with Dave about shooting. And at the time I said, I teach, whenever I'm working with kids in shooting, I always teach a 1-2 step. And I said I always did it because I felt like kids generated more power from the 1-2, and kids that shot off the hop, especially when they were younger, that they just couldn't get enough power. And so therefore I just always taught the 1-2 step. And Dave said to me, he's like, well, do you like to shoot with the 1-2 step or the hop? I said, I like to shoot off. I said, I like to shoot off the 1-2 step. He goes, well, maybe there's a kid out there who'd rather shoot off the hop, but you're having them shoot off the 1-2, and maybe they'd be more effective shooting off the hop because it's more natural for them. And I'm like, I never really thought of it that way. I always kind of thought of it as, this seems to make sense to me, but I never really, to your point, I never really had to question it until someone questioned me. And then after that, I started varying up the way I taught. I said, okay, well, instead of doing this drill where everything's going to be a 1-2 step, now we're going to do 50% 1-2 steps, 50% hops, and let's see which one feels better for that individual kid. And if one of them feels better, then let's go with that one for a while. And it just, again, it was something that, to your point, I had never crossed my mind, but until someone questioned me on it, I would have never changed. And when you get to have those kinds of conversations with coaches, it's one of the great things about the basketball coaching community is just how willing people are to share. That's probably been, I don't know if it's completely surprising to me about the podcast, but it's been something that I've really enjoyed, is the fact that we've had so many different coaches on, and they're all willing to share pretty much anything that we would want to ask them. They're willing to talk about. And obviously today with social media and the internet, it's a lot harder. Even if you want to keep something a secret, it's a lot harder to keep it a secret now than it was 20 years ago. But basically almost every coach at this point is an open book. Like, come to my practice, check out what we do. Here's a playbook that has everything that we run on the offensive end of the floor, or whatever it might be. And it's such a nice thing to be able to have that type of community that we have in the basketball coaching world, where people share the game, to use your hashtag. That's really what it's all about. I mean, is just people trying to grow and get better themselves, which in turn helps the game get better. And it's a game, obviously, that we all love. And to me, that's really a special part of it. And you getting the opportunity to interact with people in that way, I'm sure is extremely valuable to you. Let's jump back to the AAU side of it real quick. I just want to ask you, and I think we can probably summarize what I'm looking for by asking you this question. If you were going to recommend to parents what they should look for in an AAU program or an AAU coach, because this is a question I get all the time, and I see parents make mistakes about what groups or coaches they decide to affiliate themselves with all the time. What advice would you give a parent about what they should look for in a quality AAU program, a quality AAU coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, no matter what the age is, I think you gotta, especially when they're younger, is ask your kid why do they want to play basketball. And I think that tells a lot about then the route that you should take. I think if your kid says, I want to play basketball because I want to have fun, or it's fun, or I want to play basketball because my friends are playing basketball, then I think it's important to make sure you choose a program that is going to lean toward making sure that those younger grades are, having fun, and that there's not an overemphasis on winning and losing, and that there's not not these coaches that are treating these kids like they're, mini adults when they're not at all. And so I think that's important. I think if your kid says that, I want to really get good at basketball, or I want to play in high school, or I want to, be the best player I could be, if they say something that's along there, then, if their skill level is high enough, then I think it's important to put them into a program or play them up so that they are challenged. But I think too many times I see a lot with younger ages is that everyone's so caught up in A team, B team, and C team that we lose sight of the fact that we really probably at that age about 70% of them want to just play because they want to have fun. And so I think there's too much emphasis on leveling and winning at that level than there is on the fun aspect and making sure that the kids want to participate, because if they want to participate, they'll come back when they're in fifth grade and they're in sixth grade and when they're in seventh grade, and they're not going to play 1 year in fourth grade and switch a program because they didn't like it or quit the sport altogether.
I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. To me, that's one of the most important aspects of youth basketball, is to create a program, to create an environment on a team as a coach that makes the game fun so that the kid wants to come back and play again. Obviously, if a kid drops out, they're not ever going to develop into a good basketball player. And the reality is, you know it, I know it, and any coach that's been in the game for any length of time knows it, that if a kid's going to be really, really good, ultimately that only happens because of the kid. It doesn't happen because of the parent. It doesn't happen because of the coach. Now, parents and coaches can obviously facilitate that and put the kid in position to have positive experiences, but ultimately there are some kids who have positive experiences all throughout their youth basketball lives. But it doesn't matter because they don't love it enough to ever work at it to really get better. And then there are other kids who, for whatever reason, the game just grabs them and they take it and they start working and they get better. And I try to explain that to parents a lot, that look, unless your kid is going out and picking up the ball on their own and really working at it, then you probably don't need to hire a trainer for them if they're not going to go out and do it on their own. And so many parents, I think, have this skewed vision of they can make it happen for their kid. And obviously your job as a parent is to provide your kid with opportunities, but ultimately if a kid doesn't love it, they're never going to practice enough to be really good at it. And that, to me, I think you made a great point, and it's one that I don't know that I've ever heard being made, and that is that you start with the kid's intention. I think that's a really, really good way of going about things as a parent. Probably it's a good way to do it even in ways outside of basketball, but certainly within the basketball world. If I have a better idea of why my kid's playing, then I have a better idea of what I need to do in order to match them up with a program or a coach that best fits their needs and best fits what they do. Tell us a little bit about, like, in your mind, what a good AAU practice should look like. Because when I think about AAU practices, I think about, there's some team stuff that has to be done, but there also has to be some individual skill development that's built in there, because obviously you want the kids to leave that program, that coach, that practice better when they go back to their quote home team, their school team. So how do you think about designing AAU practices to make them beneficial, or the most beneficial you can for the players that are part of your program?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. For me, and this is just my one man's opinion, but I don't run any plays with, and I've coached from the fourth grade, which I'm doing right now. I'm doing fourth grade and seventh grade, all the way up to the highest, junior, sophomores, or freshmen. But it's pretty much the same for me. I don't put in plays. We only play man-to-man defense, and I have an hour and 15 minutes twice a week with them in practice. Everything we do is decision-making and small-sided games or drills that involve different decisions that have to be made. And my thought process behind it, and some people are different because some people have more time with their teams, but for us, with gym time and it being limited, an hour and 15 minutes, twice a week, I need to find out and I need to be creative in how to take the player development aspect and mesh it into the live gameplay. Because I think that's, in my opinion, I think that's a really good way of coaching and to coach, because it's fun and it's competitive, and you're teaching decisions rather than having kids memorize plays. And so my entire goal for anybody, and I tell each team this, is that we want to have fun. It's not a huge deal if we go 3-0 or if we go 0-3 on the weekend, because we just want to see improvement each tournament or each practice, whatever way we want to gauge it. And then I always say the last thing is, I want you to leave after this 2.5 months and you go back to whatever program it is, whether it's your middle school program or your travel program or your high school team, and you learned how to play the game better. And because you learned how to play the game and not plays or anything else, you're able to take that in your own way and plug it into wherever you are. But the example I always give is, if you go to a public high school and your high school runs the flex offense and plays a 2-3 zone the whole game, we're not going to do any of that here, but we're going to teach you how to play man-to-man defense, which, if you play a good zone defense, has those aspects in it. And then we're going to teach you how to play the game so that within the flex offense that is run at your school, you're going to know how to read it, how to react to it, and how to make appropriate decisions that's best for you.
That's an excellent answer. I think it really sums up the way that modern coaching, and when we think about what's going to translate best to helping a kid improve during actual gameplay, I think what you just described is a situation where if you can teach the kids how to play and not how to run plays, you're going to ultimately end up with better players. And I think, coaches sometimes, I got to have these plays in so we can do this and that. I see that all the time. And my response to that is always, look, more often than not, it doesn't matter what system you're running, especially at the youth level. If you have better players, you're going to win, regardless of what type of offense or defense you're running. 95% of the games that I've ever watched or coached, the team with the better players wins. So if you can get your players to be better, you're going to probably end up having more success as a coach. And I think that speaks to the answer that you just shared. Garrett, we're coming up on an hour and 30 minutes. So I want to start to wrap up here by giving you an opportunity to share how people can get in touch with you, how they can subscribe to the newsletter, find out more about all the great things that you're doing to try to help grow the game. And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
All right, yeah, sure. So the main thing that I use is Twitter. My Twitter handle is at @coach_Hickey5. And if you go there, you'll see a link to the sign up page for the newsletter. So you'll get all the access to everything that I was just talking about before. If you go on there, my cell phone number and my email address is on there. I'm always willing to talk or text or whatever it might be, back and forth about a topic. One of the things I love doing, and I get one every so often, is I'll feel free to share my coaching portfolio, and I ask for some other coaches to share it back with me, and we kind of review it, go over it, and then talk about it or bounce things off one another for ideas. Again, there's no fee for that. It's just trying to improve the game step by step with other coaches. There is a couple things that I'm trying to play around with the thing, because now we have we went over 25,000 reads last week, and I fine-tuned our email list because I was getting a lot of junk ones. So we're at right around 650 coaches from all different levels that are signed up for the newsletter as well. So because there's getting to be a large amount of people, there's going to be some opportunities coming up that are going to be announced that I think people might be interested in.
That's awesome. Coaches, if you're out there listening and you haven't signed up yet for Garrett's Share the Game newsletter, make sure you hop over to his Twitter and jump on there and get signed up for the newsletter. Garrett, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule to join me tonight and give us the opportunity to learn more about all the great things that you are doing to have an impact on your players and the game of basketball as a whole. So thank you. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.